shvatila sam da je ovaj kraj muzike u stvari znak da treba da počnemo naš najnoviji, to je naše najnovije predstavljanje gig metra, regionalnog izveštaja koji po 6. put je danas sa vama. Mi smo vrlo ponosni na tu činjenicu i nadamo se da će u stvari ovo naše novo predstavljanje pokazati trendove u pomeranju radne snage u regionu koji sačinjava 9 zemalja koje mi pratimo, ali i neke nove vesti koje možda niste očekivali. Sa nama je danas takođe i koleginica iz Fridrih Ebert Štiftunga iz jedinice Budućnost rada, koja će takođe predstaviti jedno veoma značajno evropsko istraživanje koje se bavi platformskim radom i koje u stvari osvetljava ovaj fenomen na možda malo drugačiji način. Tako da danas možete da očekujete jedan vrlo zanimljivi program, ali pre nego što krenemo dalje, Tanja će vam dati još nekoliko informacija o tome šta nas čeka i kako ćemo se u stvari organizovati kada su današnji jezici u pitanju. Hvala, Tanja.
Dobar dan svima. Hvala vam što ste sa nama. Ovog puta imat ćemo nešto malo drugačiji pristup našoj temi platformskog rada nego ranije, a to znači da ćemo zapravo pričati i o radu cloud radu, znači radu na digitalnim platformama i o radu na platformama koje su na lokaciji. Mi ih vrlo često gledamo zasebno, ali možda je vreme da počnemo da se vežbamo, da razmišljamo o njima u skladu sa direktivom Evropske unije koja ih zapravo stavlja zajedno sa dobrim razlogom, jer u vremenima krize kada razmišljamo o njihovom radnom statusu zapravo shvatamo da su oni vrlo slični bez obzira što nam deluju drugačiji. Posle ovog kratkog uvoda želela bih samo da vam kažem da će ovaj skup biti istovremeno na srpskom i engleskom jeziku, da je prevod obezbeđen, da ga možete videti ako pritisnete ovaj mali globus dole, interpretation, i tu možete da izaberete jezik koji želite. Da vam se ne bi mešali jezici, uvek pritisnite da slušate samo jedan jezik, a ne dva istovremeno, što je takođe moguće. I kao i obično, hvala vam puno što ćete svojom diskusijom zapravo obogatiti ovaj događaj. Očekujemo vaše pitanja ili u Q&A-u ili u chatu, potpuno svejedno. Možete takođe diskutovati i na Facebooku gde ide video stream naše konferencije. Mi ćemo se truditi da odgovorimo po svim kanalima, baš kao što je ovaj skup digitalni, znači da iskoristimo sve njegove mogućnosti. I da sada ne dužimo, želela bih da predstavim zapravo članove našeg Gigmetar tima, Zorana Kalinića, Vladana Ivanovića i Ljuboja Radonjića, i da im dam reč da nam zapravo predstave velike vesti koje su se u međuvremenu dogodile.
Hvala puno. Moje ime je Zoran Kalinić, ja sam profesor na Ekonomskom fakultetu u Kragujevcu i član centra. Predstavit ću vam prvo neke od uvodnih značajnih rezultata do kojih smo mi došli u ovom najnovijem preseku. Prvi od rezultata koji je nama privukao pažnju, to je da smo zabeležili rast na sve 3 ključne digitalne platforme koji naš gigmetar prati. Regionalni gigmetar, da podsjetim, prati 3 ključne platforme opšteg tipa koje posluju u regionu, a to su Upwork, Freelancer i Guru, i prati gig radnike u Srbiji i 8 okolnih zemalja, to su Mađarska, Rumunija, Hrvatska, Bosna i Hercegovina, Crna Gora, Albanija i Severna Makedonija. Dakle, ono što je interesantno je da su posle dužeg vremena stagnacije zapravo u ovom preseku sve 3 platforme zabeležile dvocifreni rast. Najmanji je zabeležio Upwork od 12,6%, a najveći Freelancer od gotovo 50% u odnosu na posljednji presek. To je dovelo do značajnog porasta broja gig radnika u regionu, o čemu ćemo nešto malo više pričati kasnije. Interesantno je također da za razliku od nekih ranijih preseka, u ovom preseku je taj presek zabeležen u svim zemljama u kojima mi pratimo broj gig radnika, uz mali izuzetak da se broj radnika na Guru smanjio u Rumuniji i Bugarskoj, ali sve druge platforme u svim drugim zemljama su doživele praktično rast u ovom periodu. Iako je rast Upworka bio najmanji u prethodnom periodu, on je zadržao svoju dominantnu poziciju u regionu. On je i dalje najpopularnija i najposećenija platforma u 7 od 9 ranije navedenih zemalja. Interesantno je možda napomenuti da je u prethodnom preseku on bio dominantan u svih 9 zemalja, ali smo se sada vratili na neku situaciju od nekih ranijih preseka gde zapravo u određenim zemljama, pre svega Rumuniji i Bugarskoj, freelancer, odnosno guru, imaju značajniji uticaj nego Upwork, ali ne za mnogo, negde imaju približno isti share na ovim tržištima. I ako gledamo zemlje pojedinačno, najveći rast broja gig radnika posmatrajući sve tri platforme zajedno imala je Mađarska, gde je ukupna populacija gig radnika u odnosu na prethodni presek porasla za više od 50%. Molim sledeći slajd. Ono što je za nas bilo interesantno je da se ukupan broj radnika, i možda je to jedna od najvažnijih vesti u ovom izveštaju, da se ukupan broj radnika na sve tri platforme povećao za više od četvrtine, odnosno tačnije za 26,4%. U nekoliko ranijih preseka taj ukupan broj radnika u regionu se kretao između 103, 104 do 106 hiljada, bio je relativno stabilan, odnosno stagnirao je. Dolazilo je do nekih promjena u okviru samih platformi, ali je recimo rastao broj na Upworku, smanjivao se na Guru, ali je ukupan broj, da kažem, bio relativno stabilan. Sada prvi put imamo značajan rast na svim platformama i značajan rast na ukupnom broju ovih gig radnika, tako da smo zapravo došli do ovog podatka da sad zapravo u ovom posljednjem preseku oko 130.000 gig radnika imamo u svim platformama. Dominantan igrač, odnosno dominantna platforma u regionu je Upwork. Iako je smanjen ukupan share ove digitalne platforme u regionu, ona je u prethodnom preseku iznosila nešto preko 50%, sada je to relativno učešće palo za nekih 5,5% na 45%. Upwork je i dalje lider i dalje dominantna platforma za digitalni rad u našem regionu. Na drugom mestu je freelancer sa negdje 30% tržišta, a na trećem mestu je Guru sa nekih 25%. U ovom posljednjem periodu najveći rast je zabeležio freelancer od gotovo 50%, znači na nivou celog regiona praktično je duplirao, odnosno za 50% se povećao broj gig radnika koji su registrovani, koji su vidljivi na ovoj platformi za pretraživanje. Ako gledamo zemlje pojedinačno, kao što sam malo pre napomenuo, najveći rast je zabeležen u Mađarskoj od gotovo 60%, pri tome najveći rast je bio na Guru, gde je u Mađarskoj broj freelancera, odnosno gig radnika, povećan gotovo su dvostruči, odnosno taj porast je bio oko 90%, na freelanceru je 64% i najmanji, ali i dalje najznačajniji u odnosu na neke druge zemlje je bio na Upworku, gde je taj porast bio negde oko 32%. Tako da je u ovom prethodnom periodu Mađarska zaista bila lider, odnosno zemlja koja je dobila najviše novih gig radnika u odnosu na neke ranije preseke. Sa druge strane imamo Bugarsku, gde je taj procenat bio značajno umereniji. U proseku to je negde oko 8,4%, ali treba imati u vidu da se ovako lošem rezultatu stvari najviše doprinelo smanjivanje gig radnika na Guru, gde se u ovom prethodnom periodu broj radnika u Bugarskoj praktično smanjio za četvrtinu, za nekih 26,6%, tako da je to najviše uticalo da zapravo ukupan broj radnika iz Bugarske bude veći za svega oko 8% u odnosu na neka prethodna merenja. Sljedeći slajd molim. Od najznačajnijih rezultata, odnosno zaključaka koji su vezani za Upwork kao dominantnu platformu koju mi detaljnije proučavamo od ove tri, s obzirom da je dominantna, onda nju detaljnije proučavamo po nekim drugim karakteristikama. Ono što su najinteresantniji zaključci, to je da je došlo do smanjenja relativnog učešća gig radnika u oblastima razvoja softvera i multimediji i kreativnim uslugama, koje su, uzgred budi rečeno, najprofitabilnije, odnosno cena rada u ovim oblastima je najviša, ali su i najtraženije, na račun nekih drugih zanimanja, odnosno oblasti kao što je u ovom slučaju bilo pisanje i prevođenje. Mi imamo neke predloge zašto se to možda desilo, ali o tome ćemo pričati kasnije, ali ono što je primećeno na osnovu rezultata podataka koje smo prikupili u ovom preseku, to je da u 4 od 9 zemalja regiona koje pratimo, pisanje i prevođenje je bila oblast sa najvišim rastom u ovom periodu i to je svakako za nas bio značajan podatak, značajna informacija. Druga značajna stvar je da za razliku od perioda, od relativno stabilnog perioda, relativno sporog, ali stabilnog rasta učešća žena u ukupnoj gig populaciji koji je bio kontinuiran u poslednjih nekoliko preseka, sada je malo došlo do promene tog trenda, odnosno do blagog smanjenja procenta žena u ukupnoj gig populaciji. Taj procenat je u poslednjem merenju bio negde oko 38%, u ovom merenju je negde oko 36%. Taj procent je i dalje iznad nekih drugih studija, nekih drugih analiza koje mi uzimamo kao referentne. Znači u regionu još uvek žene imaju nešto veći procenat, nešto veću ulogu nego što pokazuju neke druge studije, ali je to eto podatak koji je malo krenuo u nekom drugom pravcu u odnosu na neka merenja koje smo imali do sada. Interesantno nam je bilo da najveće učešće žena u gig populaciji zapravo neočekivano je u Albaniji, recimo i Severnoj Makedoniji, gde je to preko 40%. Konačno, ako poredimo aktivnu gig populaciju, odnosno procenat gig radnika koji su u trenutku merenja imali aktivan posao, neki posao koji je bio in progress, koji se znači realizovao u tom trenutku, vidimo da su radnici u Srbiji zapravo najaktivniji, da je svaki 5. gig radnik iz Srbije imao aktivan posao u trenutku merenja, dok su ti procenti za druge zemlje regiona značajno, neki put čak i dva puta manji nego što su to podaci za Srbiju. Poslednja vest koja je ovde izdvojena kao highlight je da je nastavljen trend, ali blagog rasta cene rada na nivou regiona. Taj rast je sada bio zaista relativno mali, ajde možemo da kažemo da ga i nije bilo, odnosno bio je relativno mali, ali postoji jedan trend rasta cene rada koji traje već neko duže vreme, tako da je nastavljen i u ovom periodu, samo u nekoj manjoj meri. Ono što je nama bilo možda interesantnije kada je cena rada u pitanju, ako mogu samo prethodni slajd da dobijem, to je da je praktično nastavljeno smanjivanje tog jaza između muškaraca i žena kada su prihodi u pitanju i to je jedan trend koji je kontinuiran već nekoliko merenja gde zapravo i dalje, kao i u mnogim drugim studijama i u drugim primerima koje mi takođe proučavamo, žene zarađuju manje nego muškarci, odnosno cene rada koju oni traže na svojim profilima su niže nego cene rada koji traže muškarci. To je delom i zbog raspodele po zanimanjima kojima se one svrstavaju, postoje raznorazni razlozi, ali ono što je nama bilo interesantno da se taj jaz smanjuje i da je sada, da kažem, najmanji od kad mi praktično imamo gigmetar i merimo ove podatke, da po ovom posljednjem merenju žene zarađuju u proseku oko 85% onoga što muškarci zarađuju od gig rada, što je opet nešto bolji rezultat nego što pokazuju neka druga svetska istraživanja. Naravno, mi imamo i mnogo detaljnije rezultate vezane za podatke za Upwork, koje će vam sada izneti moj kolega Ivanović, tako da, evo, moj kolega Ivanović će preuzeti reč i nastaviti sa ovom prezentacijom. Hvala vam.
Hvala puno, pozdravljam učesnike. Ja i Kale dolazimo sa istih institucija, to u množini, sa Ekonomskog fakulteta u Kragujevcu, Univerzitetu u Kragujevcu i pri Centru za istraživanje javnih politika. Ja ne znam iskreno koliko ću ja moći da dodam ovo što je Kale rekao, jer je Kale vrlo sažeto ispričao praktično ono što se desilo, dakle ključne trendove vezane, koje smo uhvatili u najnovijem merenju, a vezane za digitalno tržište rada u regionu Jugoistočne Evrope, ovih 9 zemalja koje merimo. Međutim, kada pogledamo podatke malo detaljnije na dominantnoj platformi gde pratimo različite osobine, odnosno karakteristike od profesija koje radimo po OLI metodologiji, dakle 6 dominantnih profesija koje postoje u digitalnom tržištu rada kada su u pitanju digitalne platforme, polove, zarade i neke druge osobine, onda možemo da dođemo još do nekog detaljnijeg uvida šta se desilo u prethodnih 6 meseci na dominantnoj platformi, što je Kale istakao, odnosno na Upworku. Ono što je interesantno da u ovom najnovijem merenju najveći broj radnika je došao iz manjih zemalja, što znači da u neku ruku one predstavljaju, dakle, najmanjih zemalja u regionu. Mi ovde imamo vrlo različite po veličini zemlje. Mislim, imamo Rumuniju koja je ubedljivo najveća zemlja sa nekih 20 miliona stanovnika, Mađarsku koja je nešto manja, Srbiju i, dakle, vrlo male zemlje poput Crne Gore koja ima 700.000 stanovnika. Tako da ono što je interesantno sada kada pogledamo odakle dolazi taj najveći broj novih radnika, on dolazi upravo iz ovih manjih zemalja u regionu. Sa druge strane, kada pogledamo udeo pojedinačnih zemalja u ukupnoj populaciji gig radnika na Upworku, iz Srbije i dalje dolazi dominantan deo. Praktično svaki 4. radnik u regionu je iz Srbije, što je interesantno jer je ona značajno manja kao tržište nego što je to slučaj recimo sa Rumunijom ili sa Mađarskom, pa čak i od Bugarske. Sa druge strane, ono što je najnovije merenje donelo na Upworku kao platformi koju smo posmatrali jeste da izuzev značajnog rasta broja, taj rast je bio prilično umeren u odnosu na neka prethodna merenja. Bilo da je bio dvocifren ili jednocifren, dakle vrlo slab je bio u Bosni i Hercegovini i u Rumuniji, dok u ostalim zemljama se on kretao između 10% u Bugarskoj do nekih 21,9% u Albaniji. Sa druge strane, Ljubo, molim te samo, uprkos različitim tim stopama rasta koje su zabeležene, ono što je bilo interesantno jeste da one nisu po magnitudi bile tako velike da bi poremetile neke strukturne karakteristike kada je u pitanju regionalno tržište rada, u smislu udela radne snage pojedinih zemalja, u smislu nekog velikog pomeranja kada je u pitanju disperzija profesija ili po drugim parametrima. I u tom pogledu su promene više bile inkrementalne prirode. Ljubo, sledeći. kada je u pitanju, sada u pokušaju da zapravo uzmemo ovu veličinu koju sam pominjao, s obzirom da je reč o veoma heterogenim zemljama, između ostalog i u pogledu nivoa razvoja i što se tiče regulatornog okvira, jer mi ovde imamo 4 zemlje koje su članice Evropske unije, imamo 5 zemalja koje su u različitim fazama pridruživanja. Dakle, imamo potpuno različito regulatorno okruženje, između ostalog, odnosno značajno različito regulatorno okruženje u kojem se odvija rad na digitalnim platformama. Ono što je interesantno da je u svim zemljama, kada je dominantna platforma u pitanju, zabeležen rast. Ali, da bismo neutralisali te razlike u veličini regulatornom okruženju, mi smo prosto posmatrali kao relativnu meru, uzeli broj gig radnika na 100.000 stanovnika, što bi negde realnije odražavalo stepen razvoja i brojnost gig populacije u ovim zemljama. I u tom smislu je Albanija zabeležila ogroman rast, odnosno najveći rast u prethodnom merenju, gde je broj gig radnika porastao za 40 ljudi na 100.000 stanovnika. I sada, gde je Srbija dugo vremena tu bila u vrhu, približno, da kažemo, Severnoj Makedoniji, sada se Severna Makedonija na prvom mestu, Albanija na drugom, a Srbija je na trećem mestu po ovom parametru, što između ostalog potvrđuje ovu tezu da iz manjih zemalja dolazilo do značajnijeg rasta u prethodnom periodu. Sa druge strane, kada pogledamo distribuciju, odnosno raspodelu gig radnika u regionu, ali po profesijama, po ovih 6 profesija koje sam pomenuo, to su profesionalne usluge, to je unos podataka i administrativne usluge, multimedija i kreativne usluge, prodaj i marketing, razvoj softvera i pisanje i prevođenje. Dakle, kada pogledamo ovih 6 profesija, ono što je već Kale negde naglasio jeste da u ovim najbolje plaćenim profesijama, dakle, koje u principu beleže u proseku najveću cenu rada, prosečnu cenu rada po satu, imamo pad udela ovih radnika u ukupnoj gig populaciji, dok je sa druge strane broj radnika u ovim ostalim profesijama koje su pod broj 1 prvo manje plaćene u proseku, pod broj 2 mnogo više izložene tehnološkim promenama u smislu da su poslovi koji rade se smanjuju jer tehnologija, prevashodno rešenja bazirana na veštačkoj inteligenciji u velikoj meri, recimo, ugrožavaju poslove poput unosa podataka. Tu se udeo radne snage povećao. Sa druge strane, kada posmatramo broj aktivnih radnika, dakle onih koji su radili u trenutku merenja, dakle od svakih 7 radnika koji su radili u proseku regionu, odnosno koji su registrovani na platformi, samo jedan je radio, što negde beleži tu prosečnu radnu aktivnost u trenutku merenja na nekih 15,4%. Pri čemu postoje značajne varijacije i razlike između zemalja. Ovo merenje je potvrdilo činjenicu da najaktivniju populaciju po ovom parametru, dakle ljudi koji su radili, imali konkretne poslove na platformama u trenutku merenja, ima Srbija. Iako je došlo do malog pada procenta u odnosu na ukupnu populaciju i sada je to iznosilo 20,2%, što znači da je svaki 5. radnik koji je registrovan na platformi radio, dok je u Albaniji taj procenat duplo manji i više nego duplo manji, ali i u Albaniji beležimo malo povećanje aktivnosti u ovom pogledu. Sa druge strane, kada se pogleda ko su ti koji su radili, od svakih 100 radnika koji su radili u trenutku merenja, 25 radnika je bilo novo, što znači da negde četvrtinu te radne populacije, aktivne radne populacije čine radnici koji nemaju prethodno iskustvo rada na platformama. Ljubo, sledeće, kada se pogleda raspodela radnika po zemljama i po profesijama, dakle po onim oblastima u kojima su oni aktivni, najsnažniji rast u svim zemljama i u svim profesijama, dakle ako pogledamo sve zemlje i sve pojedinačne profesije kako se kretao rast, je imala Mađarska i to u oblasti profesionalnih usluga, gde je rast bio za čak skoro 50% u oblasti profesionalnih usluga. Sa druge strane, najbrže rastuću populaciju unutar pojedine profesije takođe beleži pisanje i prevođenje, što je Kale pomenuo, u 5 od 9 zemalja je došlo do rasta. Ovde sa leve strane možete da vidite kako se to kretalo po pojedinim profesijama i potvrdu ovog stava da najplaćenije profesije, razvoj softvera, kreativne usluge, multimedije, profesionalne usluge su zapravo imale daleko manji rast nego ove koje se nalaze na levoj strani, a to su pisanje i prevođenje, unos podataka i prodaj i marketing. Sa druge strane, kada se pogleda najslabiji rast, dok kod ovog najjačeg rasta je očigledno da u većini zemalja došlo do značajnog rasta populacije, ogroman je rast, najveći je rast bio u pisanju i prevođenju, najslabiji rast različite zemlje beleže za različite profesije. Dakle, ne postoji neki jedinstven obrazac. Sledeće. Sa druge strane, kada posmatramo komparativne prednosti koje pojedine zemlje imaju po pojedinim profesijama, a koje se mere tako što se gleda udeo određene profesije u određenoj zemlji i poredi sa prosekom udela na nivou regiona, mi možemo da identifikujemo različite situacije kada su različite zemlje u pitanju. U tom smislu, kada su u pitanju apsolutne komparativne prednosti koje zadovoljavaju, ja se izvinjam, koje zadovoljavaju dva kriterijuma, a to je da zemlja ima veći prosek u odnosu na regionalni prosek u određenoj profesiji i drugi kriterijum koji je vezan da ima apsolutno najveći šer u odnosu na ostale profesije, to su apsolutne komparativne prednosti. Tu imamo najspecijalizovaniju radnu snagu apsolutno u Albaniji. Dakle, Albanija je vrlo specifična i ona u pisanju i prevođenju i u prodaji i marketingu ima ovu apsolutnu komparativnu prednost. Albanija ima u profesionalnim uslugama i u prodaji i marketingu, Mađarska ima u pisanju i prevođenju, Rumunija u razvoju softvera, Makedonija inače sa najslabije plaćenom radnom snagom u regionu ima u najslabije plaćenoj profesiji, a to je unos podataka i administrativne usluge, i Srbije u oblasti kreativnih usluga i multimedija. Sledeće. I sada kada ubacimo i te proseke koje imaju zemlje u pojedinim profesijama koji su veći, dakle unutar zemlje veći u odnosu na ono što je regionalni prosek, imamo prilično veliki broj profesija, u čak 4 profesije beležimo u 3 zemlje, a to su Albanija, Rumunija i Mađarska. U 3 profesije beležimo u Crnoj Gori i Hrvatskoj, dok u ostalim zemljama beležimo u po dve profesije. Ono što je interesantno kada se u istorijskom kontekstu posmatraju ove komparativne prednosti, one variraju. Dakle, zemlje one se menjaju iz merenja u merenje, što nam govori o tome o dve stvari. Jedna stvar je da zemlje imaju vrlo sličnu strukturu digitalnog tržišta rada kada je u pitanju ovih 6 profesija i da je to nezavisno od njihovog nivoa razvoja, što je vrlo interesantno, i to je recimo u odnosu na tradicionalno tržište rada, ako bi posmatrali u ovih 9 zemalja, bitno različita karakteristika, dakle da do takvih promena dolazi. I druga bitna poruka iz ovih promena jeste činjenica da je reč o jednom tržištu koje je prilično još uvek nezrelo, da tako kažem, u razvoju, emerging, i u tom smislu su ovakve vrste promena moguće od merenja do merenja. Ljubo, molim te, sledeći. Kada pogledamo sada polnu strukturu, ono što je Kale već pomenuo jeste da je došlo do tog blagog pada, u smislu da se udeo žena u ukupnoj populaciji smanjio i on je sada 35,8, odnosno na svakih 1000 radnika 358 radnika su gig radnici. Međutim, to je mnogo bolje u odnosu na ono što je svetski prosek prema različitim istraživanjima, odnosno recimo svetski prosek iznosi 32%. I ovde sve zemlje praktično u regionu bolje stoje od tog proseka, donekle su izuzeci Hrvatska i Bosna i Hercegovina. A sa druge strane, ovo što nam je donelo najnovije merenje jeste da je čak u ove dve zemlje koje sam pomenuo došlo i do pada, i to u Hrvatskoj prilično veliko kada je u pitanju udeo žena, a sa druge strane u Bosni i Hercegovini on bio manje izraženiji, ali Bosna i Hercegovina tradicionalno ima nepovoljnu, da kažem, u poređenju sa prosekom regiona nepovoljnu polnu strukturu. Onde gde je izrazito snažan rast bio jesu Mađarska i Severna Makedonija, gde je u velikoj meri došlo do porasta broja gig radnica u odnosu na prethodno merenje. Međutim, u svim zemljama je došlo do pada njihovog udela, što govori o tome da je dominantan priliv, dakle najveći rast zapravo zabeležen kada je u pitanju muška gig populacija. Sa druge strane, ovde kada govorimo o specijalizaciji na nivou profesija, a sa aspekta polne strukture, interesantno je da postoji vrlo jasan obrazac kada su muškarci u pitanju. Postoje dve profesije u kojima su oni u svim zemljama apsolutno dominantni. I to su dve najplaćenije oblasti. Praktično oblast profesionalnih, oblast multimedija i kreativnih usluga i oblast razvoja softvera. I tu se praktično dugoročno situacija neće promeniti jer trendovi potvrđuju ili održavanje ovih odnosa ili blagi rast na račun muškaraca tokom vremena. Sa druge strane, dve profesije u kojima su najčešće gig radnice brojnije se odnose na unos podataka i administrativne usluge i na oblast pisanja i prevođenja. Sa druge strane, ono što je za Albaniju još jedna specifičnost, dakle Albanija nekako u celom regionu odstupa od onoga što je dominantan obrazac ili onoga što je prosek, pa tako i u ovom pogledu polne strukture, jer žene su čak u 4 profesije brojnije od muškaraca. To ni jedna druga zemlja ne beleži. Ljubo, hvala. Ono što je interesantno jeste da je rast zabeležen. On nije preterano veliki, 1,3%, 26 centi ako se to pogleda u apsolutnom izrazu. Međutim, ovde su dve stvari od značaja. Jedan je taj dugoročni trend gde imamo polako oporavak. Mi smo u pandemiji uhvatili zapravo da je došlo do pada prosečne cene rada. Nakon toga kontinuirano sledi neki oporavak gde imamo blagi rast. Međutim, ono što je vrlo značajno praktično za sve zemlje u regionu jeste da su cene rada izražene u dolarima. A vrednost dolara je u prethodnih godinu dana porasla za 20% u odnosu na vrednost evra, tako da je zapravo kroz kursne razlike ovaj rast mnogo značajniji nego što to nominalno izgleda kada se pogledaju ove cifre. Najveći rast u prethodnih 6 meseci je zabeležila Mađarska, koja inače ima najvišu radnu snagu i prosečna cena rada po satu iznosi nekih 23,8%. Sa druge strane, najmanji rast, i to je ono što je negativan trend, je zabeležen prosečni rast u Makedoniji i prosečna cena rasta je iznosila svega $16 i osim toga Makedonija ima vrlo nepovoljnu strukturu tržišta gig rada jer dominiraju one profesije koje su u većoj meri nego što je u ostatku zemalja regiona koje su najslabije plaćene. Sa druge strane, kada se pogleda najveći prosečan rast po satu, dakle cene rada, on je zabeležen u Crnoj Gori i taj rast koji je iznosio nešto preko $1, ako se pogleda $1,1, ako se pogleda na mesečnom nivou šta to konkretno znači za gig radnike, to je značio zaradu koja je za $200. Dakle, pogleda se prosečno radno angažovanje od 176 sati, koliko ljudi radi u regularnom radnom odnosu, to je značilo $200 više za gig radnike konkretno u Crnoj Gori. I ono što sam već napomenuo na početku, ta konvergencija u dohodcima se nastavlja tokom vremena i sada to iznosi 85,3% u proseku. Cena rada iznosi 85,3% gig radnica prosečne cene gig radnika, što je značajno više u odnosu na prosek, gde je to, na svetski prosek, gde je to oko 80%, 82%, ili neko istraživanje koje je rađeno u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama, te su te razlike još drastičnije. Ljubo, sada na kraju prosto sumiram, promene su postojale, one nisu bile toliko disruptivne da bismo rekli da se desilo nešto epohalno, ali sa druge strane su potvrdile nalaze koje mi već u kontinuitetu dugo vremena pratimo, koje se tiču strukturnih karakteristika ili parametara na tržištu rada. Hvala vam puno svima. Nadam se da nisam bio dug.
Hvala Vladane, hvala Zorane. Mislim da je ova prezentacija dala dovoljno informacija da možemo u stvari da razumemo koliko je zanimljiva ova naša scena i pojedinačno kada pričamo o našim zemljama u ovom okruženju, ali i na agregatnom nivou. I sada, u stvari, ponovo ću predstaviti našu današnju gošću, Ingu Sabanovu, koja je u stvari istraživač i policy oficir u jedinici budućnost rada Fridrih Ebert Štiftung Fondacije u Berlinu. Inga, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us. It would be lovely before we actually present the research results of your own work, to hear your comments with regards to our own findings and recent trends that we noted through GigMeter.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor, and thank you so much for this brilliant presentation. It definitely gives very useful and insightful data. So first of all, I would like to congratulate on a very interesting project, especially methodology-wise, because it provides definitely the data that hasn't been gathered before. Not only in relation to the region you're discussing, but also talking about new digital labor markets worldwide. So firstly, I would like to also to reflect on the, let's say, geopolitical situation of the research on platform work. It happens that there is not so much data available. What is actually the platforms? What is the platform work? Who are the platform workers? And it happens that in much of the situation, the discussion is predominantly influenced by a number of institutes that are usually based, let's say, in UK, Netherlands, Germany, and because of the certain tradition and certain focus in the way how platform work is viewed is very much dominated by certain discourses. And what happens at the end and what happened actually with the platform work is narrowly understood only as food delivery or transport services. Because everyone, when thinks about a platform worker, immediately thinks of either Uber or Uber Eats, and especially much of the research because of the COVID-19 pandemic has focused exactly on these platforms, and therefore. What you have produced is very insightful and it's very interesting, and it really has the potential to grow in a much bigger project than you have at the moment. So it's and also as I said before, that it draws completely different picture. For example, that the information what we had gathered on, for example, on Serbia was mainly based on Fair Work project report, which looked exactly what I said before on food delivery and transport services. So now talking about the your results in particular, and talking about the new digital market, specifically focusing on let's say freelancer jobs. It's very insightful because you provide focus not just on platform workers, but for platform workers who are women and men. So there is a very interesting dynamic, and it's more a general question, how actually we can enrich your data with probably additional research, and to see how what are the incentives for women and men joining the platforms? Because I assume that one of the reasons for joining the platform work, gig work, is the flexibility, is being autonomous, being flexible. Nevertheless, flexibility means totally different things for women and men, especially when the childcare or other care responsibilities are involved. And another interesting part, which would be good also to hear your opinion, specifically how digital markets, new digital labor markets, mirroring traditional activities, and whether, let's say, new digital fields have the potential to close gender gaps in income. Probably not. And if there is a possibility, what should be done from policymaking point of view, how to reach, to eliminate the gender gap between women and men. And the final point of which I would like to also to hear your opinion, and whether you have it from your data or probably from the other research in the context of Serbia or the region itself, what are the instances, if there are any instances of organizing the workers, freelance workers? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Inga. A lot of excellent questions. I think we will be able to answer at least some of them. But before that, we would like to give a word to our colleague, Mako Chaba, who is our colleague from Hungary. And he will try to answer this question with regard to Hungarian workers. And I would also like to say that we have a lot of our colleagues from other countries. We are researching both phenomena, and we will do that even more in a period which is before us. So we will be able really to, to discuss this in even more detail, and especially because we see that our countries, although all of them are providers of workers, also have very different stories. So Mako, thank you for joining us, and please tell us what's the story of Hungary.
Okay, thank you very much. And how much time was allocated for me, Tanya? I do not want to take your precious time limit. I have
Let's say 5 to 7 minutes, if it's possible. First, Mako, please tell us a little bit more about yourself. You're for a long time researcher of the platform economy, among other things, and then let's go on this Hungarian case where we also had the demonstrations like we had in Serbia.
Okay, I would like to be very much focused on your request. And but firstly, I would like to thank you very much for you and Branka to invite me from the Public Research Center of Belgrade. I was very happy to hear the presentation of Professor Kalinic and Professor Ivanovic. And unfortunately, I didn't know Inga Sabanova background, but it was also very interesting remarks and comments. To save time, I would like to, if you agree, later on, I would be happy to send my comments in details for the authors, and I would be happy to read the report. I only would like or wish to mention something which was not really emphasized during the discussion today. And mainly I would like to speak about the context to better understand why Hungary has this really remarkable increase. And I know the former survey data of a gigameter when Hungary had rather modest performance, if I remember well. Firstly, I would like to briefly describe the changes. I would like to identify the drivers, what are behind. I need to inform you about, unfortunately, about the economic history of the Hungarian development in the last 3 decades. Maybe you are not aware the extremely intensive investment of multinational firms in Hungary the first 2 decades in the shared service sectors. For instance, compared to Romania or Bulgaria. It means in the first 2 decades, this sector really absorbed, hired the majority of the highly skilled and language speakers Hungarians. It means Hungarians, the majority of them, were not really interested in the platform work. This is one very important aspect to understand. And in general, I wish to ask from you when you finalize this research report to write a little more about the context to better understand, because I discuss your result this early morning. I do not like to wake up very early morning, but I have the small mini workshop looking at your presentations, and I had to explain too many things to my Hungarian partners. This one thing, the different economic development road, if you compare these 9 countries, it's very important to understand what is happening now. Secondly, I didn't saw, maybe I am a little still sleepy, but I couldn't see on the slides, on the presentation, any remark on the impact of the COVID-19. COVID-19 represents a very radical breakthrough, according to me, in the working practices. And thanks to the fast development of the digital infrastructure, it speeded up, look for the new model of working practices. It means during the 2 years, a lot of Hungarians, especially the highly skilled workforce involved working in the knowledge-intensive service sectors, really like very much to work 100% home. And you have also very interesting research on the platform work. One of the core motives for many people to decide to work on platform to avoid the hierarchical control and they do not recognize, but to shift into the other type of control. It means the COVID-19, more than 2 years, in my view, represents a very important collective learning process. And unfortunately, in the social science in Hungary, I don't know, Serbia, underestimate studying the innovation process, organization, innovation, social or managerial, the necessary collective learning. It takes time. And during the COVID, the large portion of the population recognized an alternative mode of working. And following the COVID, now, I don't know Serbia, but in Hungary, in many firms try to push former home workers to work in a hybrid work, okay? 2-3 days in the office, 2-3 days at home. But the workforce, I don't know, we have no research about it. Therefore, I was very happy to listen to your presentations. We do not know the composition of motivation of the various traits of the workforce, but the majority of them still prefer to work at home. And during the 2 years of COVID-19, these people learned to work using digital tools and try to test the platform work. If you look at the shift from homework using digital tools and to test, to try something on platform, they are interrelated. And I think this is very important driver for people to work on the platforms. And the third factor, but this is a hierarchy of the drivers. I would like to stress it because many people in Hungary prefer to stress only the impact of the economic crisis. And the third factor is the economic crisis. It means that if you look at the inflation rate in Hungary, comparing not the other 8 countries in this survey, but for instance to Ukraine, when we have a war, unfortunately, it is really shocking. I do not want to explain because we have no time. It would be good to speak about it separately, but unfortunately we have 25% inflation rate. The same level as in Ukraine. We have no war yet, no fightings, only one, even no accidents related to the war like Poland. And secondly, in relation to this high rate of inflation, the wage increase doesn't match the increasing price increase, and therefore growing number of workforce is looking for the platform to earn money. To understand the attractivity to work on platform, there are many factors explaining it. I would like to focus one aspect. Maybe it's very understandable for everybody. You indicated, and I was not at all surprised, that higher the wage hours is Hungary in the platform work. Therefore, it would be very interesting the next time to focus more on the diversity of the job structure, and we try to compare these 9 countries and also compare the wages on the non-platform version of these jobs. There are very interesting American studies, you know it very, very well. Kallenberg wrote an extremely nice paper, very short paper, comparing the software engineer hourly wage in USA and software engineers hourly wage, for instance, in, I don't know, Serbia or India or something like that. But to understand the attractivity for the highly skilled language speakers, if you look at the Hungarian forint and the dollar's rate last year, it is really, really shocking. The 2021, the Hungarian forint and the US dollar rate, because the platform were not the euro, the dominant money in many cases, only in the European case, was 284 forints, okay? And nowadays, 404 is fluctuating. But what is interesting, 40% increase. If you compare inflation rate, this exchange rate, and the rate of wage increase in Hungary, you may understand the very strong economic motivation of the Hungarian highly skilled, especially language-speaking workforce. I do not wish to speak on other aspects. I have some 4 other factors to explain it, but if you agree, I will make this list and send to Branka Andjelkovic. You may share among yourself. And finally, I would like to mention two final remarks. Firstly, I would be really happy to keep in touch the people who did participate in this very important survey. And I would be happy if we could add something what we learned during these surveys to map even deeply what is happening in this region, because I am very much convinced that within the medium term, especially in Hungary, but I am convinced that in other countries, there will be very interesting development in searching the new models of the work, not only platform work or homework and some, but for instance, in Hungary, there is a very intensive debate on the 4 working days. Okay. And the second remark, I plan to launch next year a survey to better understand the complex impacts of the actors' attitude concerning the increasing rate of the hybrid work in Hungary. I was very much surprised that a growing number of firms are using these forms of work, but according to literature, there is more complicated way to organize this work than 100% homework. And we wish to finish this work maybe in the autumn, and I plan to organize one-day hybrid or on-site conference in Budapest, supported, I do hope very much, but in Hungary, what is certain is uncertainty at this moment. At this moment, I have resources. I don't know next year whether they still have. To better understand the drivers and the preconditions of these new forms of work, one-day conference, the first day of the conference, I wish to invite high-quality data scientists to focus on the social responsible artificial intelligence. In the morning session and afternoon, we wish to focus on the new models of work and experiences, hybrid work, platform work, home working, the same way as we did organize this April 21st, an international hybrid conference.
Marco, thank you. Marco, thank you so much. I think we are running, I'm sorry, I think we are running a bit out of time. First of all, thank you for the invitation and laying out this important information about the conference that is going to be organized in Hungary. But even more so, thank you for contextualizing the work that we do. On many occasions, when we talk about platform work, we are just focusing on one segment, on the phenomenon of platform workers and platform economy. And I really think that it is really important to understand the environment in which we live. And that was Inga's question that I would refer later to my colleague Vladan Ivanovic. But before we do so, I would actually like to hear Inga's presentation about the research that her organization has been carrying out. And this is one of the research we find really fascinating, maybe one of the major researches at this point of time in Europe regarding platform work. Inga, without further ado, thank you.
Thank you. Just quickly again introduce myself and the center I come from. So I'm a policy officer, researcher at the Fridrih Ebert Foundation, and we have a special competence center dedicated to future of work. At our center, we're mainly focusing on 3 aspects: responsible digitalization, new forms of work, and new technologies at the workplace. So to begin with a platform project, we started, me and my colleague, we started with the idea that we would like to visualize some aspects of regulatory aspects of platform economy to make it more, let's say, easy for policy makers and different stakeholders to understand what we are talking about when we talk about platforms and platform workers. We developed a questionnaire which was distributed at the national level to different researchers. The idea was to not to have primary data, but thoroughly focus on the secondary data available, because we already have enough data gathered. Nevertheless, we were trying to think how we can gather it to centralize in one project. So our questionnaire was focusing on several aspects: the laws, regulations, then any available statistical data, or even qualitative data, small scale research, grey literature on platforms and platform workers. And then we were also focusing on the number of collective agreements, whether they were reached at the national, sectorial, or regional levels, or even company level. And finally, court cases. Just to illustrate, let me stop this, and then I will share our website. So initially we thought that visualization, so we developed this 7 maps. As you can see that in terms of the definition of platform work, and to say before, we have many blank spots on our map, and unfortunately, the most countries we're talking to today in this event, they are not part of, at the moment, they're not part of the map, but they will be. Back to the map. So we have several maps, and you can see that when it comes to the definition, what is a platform? Online platform. And here we're really focusing, we try to be quite general about what is the platform, what is the definition, but we're predominantly focusing on digital labor platforms. And as you can see that the definitions non-existent, nearly non-existent in Europe. When it comes to the employment status, we have some countries where the employment status is recognized at the regional level. For example, in some countries, we already see that the definition is unclear because it's a question of negotiation, and in other countries it's even not entered the public discourse. Then we also see that we have already specific regulations which can be applied to platform workers. When it comes to the registries for the platform companies, we have some examples, especially in the case of France and Belgium, where we have national registries. Nevertheless, it's also under the question how effective they are. For example, in France, the most information that the national authorities have, it's not public. And in Belgium, again, the registries exist, but there are ways how companies can avoid registering. When it comes to collective agreements, we see that you have emergence of negotiation, and some collective agreements were reached in the Nordic countries and in the south of Europe, which also reflects in the court cases, because we see that there are many court cases emerged specifically in Italy, Spain, and Spain in relation to the employment status. So now, in a way that it provides a little snapshot, what are the platforms, but it doesn't tell much into that details. For that reason, we in the process of developing fact sheets for each country, we already have 10 fact sheets available on our website. And on top of this, we wrote a report, me and a researcher from Romania, Dr. Dalia Badoi, we developed a report. We call it a policy report, but nevertheless, it's more, let's say, it's more abstract level, because we try to really to grasp complexity of the European landscape by focusing the same questions as before. Who are the platforms? What is work? What is platform work itself? And who are the platform workers? And how we can answer these questions. What are the implications, policy implications we can talk about with this regards? We started analytically with 2 assumptions: that a platform work is just a type of work. We also try to move away a little bit from the discourse that platform work is a typical form of work. So no, it's work. So let's start talking what's happening there. And at the same time, another assumption is more abstract, that platformization of economy or the creation of these digital markets, it's ongoing deregulation of different sectors of the economy. So what we have, and talking the emergent trends, and it's very interesting what Saba Marco was mentioning before. Yes, first of all, of course, COVID has accelerated the digitalization of work in certain sectors, and of course we've seen explosion of and demand for certain type of services such as food delivery and taxis. Nevertheless, it's not the full picture. We have data, and there are many studies which say that we also need to look at in the context of economic crisis, and already in the countries in the south, especially freelance platforms were growing because of the economic crisis, and this is in the case of Spain, Greece, and Portugal. And the third, the trend we see that platformization of transport and food delivery sector is not unique, and we really need to look at other sectors of economy which going through this process, especially cleaning, domestic services, care. In a way, we see that in these particular sectors, platforms work as a temporary agency or replacing temporary agencies that exist before, and this trend can be also applied, for example, in translation. It's in a way it's replicating, mirroring the traditional activities in the economy. So now answering the questions, who are the platforms? Since we don't have regulations or definitions within the regulations who are the platforms, it's very difficult to say who are they. So the source of the definition might come either from the labor regulations or tax regulations. And in most of the cases, it's missing. So in fact, what when we start talking about platform work, we don't know who are these companies, in many circumstances, I mean, they emerged as startups, they overtaken by other companies, they physically not present in the in one country, they moving headquarters from one country to another, and this is very good examples with many platforms which were acquired by other platforms. They still keep the name, for example, Foodora. I think that was acquired by Delivery Heroes. Delivery Heroes, is a big multinational company, was acquired by Just Eat. And the headquarters are in the Netherlands because of the tax reasons. So we can see that, in fact, while we're talking about, and from the point of view of sociologists who are working on platform work, we're talking about platform work, we're talking about platform workers, but we never talk about platform companies, and we don't know who are they. And in fact, it's quite difficult to find out who are they, because they don't have any obligation to share the data. And what we have, it's only the blogs, reports, Crunchbase website. That's the major source of the information about the platforms. When it comes to platform work itself, in terms of the tasks, there is nothing new really about the platform work, except that some things are, like in the case of translations, freelancers, is done remotely. But in terms of the new skills, there is nothing really new. But what is new in the forms of work, in the world of work, what is happening, that we facing a new ways of subordination. And it's a two type of subordination, which is, of course, it's at the level of management, because you're managed by not humans. In many cases, you're managed by the algorithmic systems in terms of allocation of tasks. And another form of subordination, it's intermediate companies in between. For example, in many countries, let's say it's in the case of Romania, it's in the case of Poland, Uber is not present there. Even platform workers work for Uber, but actually they don't work for Uber. They employed by intermediate companies which provide service to Uber. And it also creates, from the regulation point of view, a total mess. If we're talking about employment status, who is responsible for employment status? Intermediate companies or the actual Uber, who employs intermediate companies who employ platform workers? So that's an interesting observation. And the final thing about the platform workers, and I'm glad that you focused on gender in your research, but what we also see that the platform work is a highly gendered and racialized field. It's very difficult to generalize which platforms, in which countries, in which regions, how the ratio between women and men present in each platform. But we see that, for example, in the platform work, which in relation to the food delivery and taxi services, in many countries, you have migrants who are working there. Okay, it's a big question, who is migrant, whether we're talking about irregular migrants, we're talking about a second generation. It's a big issue, but we see that they're present there. We see that also that, for example, for newcoming migrants, it might be an easy way to get into the labor market, to start working. Nevertheless, it's a big question whether it's a good or bad thing, because as a temporary opportunity, it becomes permanent and it becomes a trap for many people who would like to move probably to more regularized sectors of economy. And in terms of the women, as I said before, that if we're looking in generally in the research, it's very much, especially academic research, is very much focusing on male workers, and usually the experiences of women participation in platform work remains very, very invisible. And this is what I also mentioned before. It's extremely important to understand the reasons why, for example, women joining platforms and how it intersects with their childcare responsibilities. So, so in the end, I mean, we provide some very general recommendations, and of course, first one, if we're talking about the platforms, and if, well, I mean, at the moment we're in discussion of the directive, and it's another big topic, and at the moment it's blocked. But if we have a definition, if we are already moving towards regularization of platform work, we need to have even a step further. We need to have national registers. We need to understand how many platforms present within national borders. And platforms have the data on platform workers. They have lots of information, but they don't have responsibility to share it with the national authorities. So we need to have these mechanisms. The second thing is when it comes to the subordination and new forms of subordination, and it's really good that, for example, algorithmic management was already mentioned in the proposal for the directive. Nevertheless, we still don't know what is algorithmic management and how it is different between different platforms. And to understand really what it is, how it works, of course, it shouldn't be a black box, but we need to have really transparent understanding and cross-platform variations, how it is used in practice or how it shouldn't be used in relation to the workers. And then finally, to understand more experiences and responses that we need to have in order to have stable income, social insurance, and safety for all workers, including migrants and women. It's not only the role of the government; it's also the role of the social partners, because in many cases, the social partners are not very much involved in these issues, and it needs to be much more visible within the work of the trade unions to highlight involvement of migrants and women in the workplace. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Inga, thank you very much. Thank you for adding the depth to our question. Sometimes we are so immersed in platform economy that we actually need this perspective, which is really putting platform economy in a much larger context. And we can also say that we had this experience of how hard it's really to define this type of work from our experience with working with the government on the topic of how freelancers, or actually cloud workers, should be understood as workers, or from the perspective of as self-employed, or whether from perspective of work or taxing. So it gave us a lot of actually insight into how hard it is to explain really to the government what it is all about. And we are still not close even to explaining this other part, and those are those workers working on location. We will talk about a little bit more in a few days when we are going to present the second Fair Work report. But now let's move to this gender question, very interesting one on which we also worked. And now I'm giving floor to Branka, and then. And also before I do that, let me say that we are waiting for the questions from the public. So if you have a question for Inga or anybody else, please let us know either in Q&A or in chat. As we know, there are people from the unions here. There are other researchers from other countries. There are a lot of people who are really thinking about the platform economy. So we hope to have your questions or maybe remarks. Let us know in chat or in Q&A, Branka.
Thanks, Tanya. Actually, I have a few questions for Inga, but before we do that, I would like to refer to the question that she posed about context in which labor work happens in these countries that we discuss, and also the relation of platform work to traditional labor market. And if you have some time, and I think we have a few minutes, please, Vladan, can you just outline the impressions of labor market in the region and in Serbia in particular, and how this really relates to the platform work we are discussing today? Thanks.
Thank you. So if I understood you correctly, you said that I should clarify maybe the context in which labor work happens and what drives it in our measurements during the last few years. So it's a very complex question. So Mr. Csaba from Hungary already explained a bit about the context in Hungary, and every country is very specific in its own way, from different perspectives. So we really need to, if we want to understand labor market on some particular in some particular country, we need to see the context which varies from country to country on the one hand. On the other hand, we see not so big differences on the labor market, digital labor market, when it comes to these countries, which means that this labor market is a very specific, it's a new market, it's a very specific in a sense that it attracts a similar population for different countries, independently from the context in which these countries operate. But regarding the structural parameters and structural characteristics, there is one thing which could be potentially very important, and this refers, and it explains actually the gender differences, the differences in payments, the differences in every other aspects, that we cannot observe the digital labor market, freelance labor market in the region independently from the deeper societal structures which determine the production of human capital within the country. So in that sense, we cannot have gender equality in the software development on the digital labor market if we have the ratio of men and women in enrolling the engineering sciences or software sciences 7-to-1, that their men are much numerous in these sciences than the women. So you cannot find simply the software engineers in the digital labor market because they are simply not produced in the educational system. So in one sense. In the other sense, I believe that the differences regarding the gender, regarding the payment, regarding the professions are existing, are dependent, are replicated from the traditional societal educational system. But on the other hand, they are much smaller than it is the case on traditional labor market. So by definition, the digital labor market is impersonal. So you are offering some service for some price, and you should win the job if you offer the same quality of the service by lower price. But it doesn't happen when it comes to gender, and it should be taken into account many different things, at least some things related to the different business strategies women and men are pursuing in the development of professional careers. So it's a very complex question. We have hard data, not the personal data, and a lot of research should be done in this regard to better understand how these dynamics on digital labor market happens. Hopefully I was very short in explaining.
Thank you, Vladan. I received one question in direct message from the public for Inga. Inga, we were wondering, what do you think about this directive and national legislation in the countries which they have it? Like how this will affect our own region, and whether actually at the national level we have even more space to regulate or to, you know, to put this platform work in the context. Like you said, it is a work. It is work. So do you think that the directive is giving enough space, or national regulators may give more space to actually this type of understanding of this work, exactly like work.
Thank you so much for the question. Well, in terms of the regulation in the directive, we have at the moment on the table, because this is a draft. It's a draft, and it's a big question in which form it will be adopted. And at the moment, for example, in which direction it's going, there will be many gaps. And one of the it's also about the recognition of, let's say, who is the main problem is the definition between self-employed and the worker. And when it comes to the current form, what we have and on which direction it's going now, it gives still much freedom for platforms to classify their workers as self-employed. So in fact, it doesn't produce the results we were hoping for. Nevertheless, it's still not adopted, and most likely it will move to the further negotiation later on in 2023. So that's the major obstacle at the moment, whether we reclassify falsely, because at the moment there are thousands of people who are falsely classified as self-employed. So in fact, the ideal version of the directive would be that those who are falsely classified as self-employed will be classified as workers, and those who would like to be self-employed, they will have the right to choose of being a self-employed. So that's the major obstacles we have at the moment, and we cannot really predict in which form the directive will be adopted. So it has also certain implications what will going to happen at the national level. Since directive is adopted, national governments will have time to adopt it into the national legislations. Those countries who are not part of the European Union, in a way, they are affected, indirectly affected, because in most of the cases there are certain laws which are adopted at the European level. They have a spillover effect on the neighboring countries. So and therefore at the moment we are in a state of limbo to see whether we're going to have, in which form we're going to have the directive.
Thank you, Inga. We have a comment in our chat box from our colleague Elvisa Drišti, a professor at the University of Squadra. I was hoping to have her as a panelist, but somehow it's not yet possible. So I will just read her comment. She was reflecting on both types of work. She thanks to the research insights that he provided, but she also noted the difference between genders in remote and on-location work. And it seems that remote work, at least in her opinion, and also I think in ours, is a segment where we can still see a more gendered balance approach. Maybe because these are white-collar jobs, says she, and maybe because it is related to the fact that mostly university and vet institutions and students in Albania are females. So this is why Albania really stands out as a country with the high level of women participation in this remote work. Which then brings me again to the question of gender. I know that you haven't had much time to provide insights in your own research in this dimension. But what is the plan that you're having with regards to exploring gender dimensions of platform work in the future?
Thank you. Talking again to what we had before, that in the conversation that we mentioned that let's say online labor market mirrors the traditional labor activities, and this type of mirroring has different dimensions. One is based on the sectors. It's quite obvious that if we have traditional sector which is dominated by female workers, such as care or cleaning, for example, in many cases, online market will be the same. And this is what we see, for example, with care platforms or cleaning platforms. They are dominated by women. And in many cases, in some countries, for example, in England and Germany, they will be dominated by migrants, so by migrant women. So that's one way of mirroring the same sectors. On the other hand, as you mentioned before, in a way with, let's say, white-collar jobs, it's a bit different. And in a way, it also mirrors the traditional labor market. And since, as you said, in Albania, you have highly educated women, let's say in translation services or software development. So it's kind of obvious that they will be present in digital labor markets. When it comes to our future plans, how we want to look at gender and migration, we plan a study looking at the care platforms specifically, and they are they are women-dominated platforms, and also looking more. This is again, it's just at the moment at the level of discussion, looking at the issue of migration. Nevertheless, migration, as I said before, it's a very big topic, because it starts with a question: who is migrant? And you have different levels of migration or being present in platform work.
Thank you, Inga. I think that today's discussion really revolved about around the context in which platform work happens. It cannot be seen as an isolated phenomenon. It really reflects our labor market. It reflects the tradition, the DNA, let's put it, of our societies in terms of economics and political structures. And I would like to close with this notion in mind. But before we do so, please, Ljubo, I would like us to remind the audience about our highlights and conclusions when it comes to the latest edition of GigMeter at this point of time, and then we're actually heading towards the end.
Thank you, Branka. I will try to summarize today's presentation and results of GigMeter, and somehow to outline the importance of the GigMeter as a tool that we use. First, we saw that gig work in the region continued to grow, despite the slight stagnation that has existed in the past year. And the second, we saw that new gig workers on the platforms obviously do not find their first engagement much easily. Because their biggest competition is in the form of already active workers. So they need to struggle with the competition that comes from the already experienced workers on the platforms. Second, certain professions are gaining popularity in the latest measurements, such as writing and translating, or writing and translations. Still, we need to see whether some professions are going to become more popular in the future when we're speaking about especially platform economy. And when we speak about platform economy, we actually need to identify the reasons why some professions are becoming more relevant on platforms. When we will be able to see that, we will be able to identify some trends on their traditional markets. And finally, we spoke today much about gender gaps, and apart from the impression that the gig market is in this part, especially in this part of Europe and the region, and over the globe is growing, women are doing quite well in those markets, in platform economy, compared to the global average. And to conclude, despite the gender gap we spoke about, the convergence between women and men has a positive trend in the region. And we saw that women will still earn less, and they will probably earn less than men on digital platforms, but these differences will continue to decrease. So that were my main impressions about our results from the gig matters and the latest measurement we did.
Hvala ti, Ljubo. Ja ću sada ponovo preći na srpski. Da kažem da smo imali zaista jednu odličnu diskusiju, da imamo možda malo, ali veoma posvećeno društvo zapravo ovoj temi. Da bismo ga mogli naravno nastaviti i sada još dosta dugo, ali znajući koliko smo svi ipak naviknuti na Zoom, da ne možemo baš toliko lako da se skoncentrišemo. Ja bih zapravo htela odmah da vas pozovem i na drugi deo naše diskusije, gde se nadamo da ćemo vas vidjeti zapravo sve. 20. decembra u 12 sati na istom mestu na Zoomu predstavit ćemo drugi izveštaj Fair Work Srbija 2022, gde ćemo pričati malo više o ovom radu na lokaciji sa platformama koje su tu ili za koje verujemo da su tu, ali nam je Inga upravo objasnila da i one mogu biti zapravo udaljene od domaćeg zakonodavstva, a i dalje upravljati našim tržištem rada. To je jedna vrlo zanimljiv slučaj koji se još nije dogodio u Srbiji, ili mar mi ne znamo da se to desilo, ali i na ovom tržištu zapravo vidimo različite promene i imamo razloga da se udubimo u njega, tim pre što za razliku od ovog online rada, ovaj rad u Srbiji još nije zapravo dobio nikakvu pažnju zakonodavca. Mi smatramo da je to vrlo interesantno, tim pre što ovde govorimo takođe o jednom radu koji se organizuje preko trećih strana, koji vrlo često ni same sebe ne vide kao poslodavce, nego zapravo kao neke, kako bismo rekli, neke ljude ili organizacije koje zamagljuju zapravo suštinu rada na platformama. Dakle, da sada zaista skratim, hvala vam najljepše na učešće, hvala vam puno na diskusiji, hvala vam mnogo što ste uneli zapravo kontekstualni deo ovog našeg istraživanja koji je strahovito bitan da bismo u suštini mogli da razumemo koliko je ova tema bitna ne samo za ljude koji su trenutno angažovani u platformskoj ekonomiji, nego zapravo za sve ljude koji učestvuju na našim tržištima rada. I dakle, pozivam vas da se ponovo vidimo 20. decembra u 12 sati na Zoomu. Mi ćemo vrlo uskoro poslati taj poziv, tako da se nadamo još jednom lepom i zaista produktivnom druženju, a ostaćemo i u kontaktu oko produbljivanja naših istraživanja da bismo zapravo pred publiku mogli uvek da izađemo sa još malo više odgovora na teme koje nas zanimaju. Hvala puno svima.
Hvala vam.